Hey everybody, it's the Knitty Professor. When I was knitting this sweater, it's probably a year and a half ago maybe, one of the things that I loved most was the feel of the yarn on my hands. And I thought that would be a natural kind of topic to talk about since the other day I was talking about the pleasures of knitting in a time when the more simple pleasures we can have, the better. So I thought I should get into part of the rationale of the pleasure, which is the substance itself that we are using, that we are working with our hands. This is the brand of yarn that went into that sweater, and I have another sweater's quantity, which I look forward to knitting. This is Feederbrook Farm, and it is a 100% blue-faced Leicester wool. It's a DK. I think it's a 2-ply. See if you agree. I think it's a 2-ply. I have multiple colors of this because in this sweater that I knit, I basically used one background color and then I used over the top of that another variegated color, but I thought it'd be fun to combine different colors. But that was one of the things that gave me the most pleasure when I was knitting this. One issue I had, I was almost having too much fun because it ended up being a little big. And I actually shrunk it a little bit in the dryer and it helped. But I have to start all over again when it comes to gauge for starting the new sweater. But in any case, I was thinking about this topic last night because I went back to knitting on my cashmere sweater that I've started. And I've just started it, as you all know. I got the yarn for a pittance from the closing sale at Personal Threads in Omaha. And by the way, they're still selling stuff. My daughter told me that she was going to hit the store because she lives there and see if she couldn't pick up something to make mittens with. But here's where we're at right now. I have finished the 2.5 inches of ribbing and just started the color work. So as I was knitting this, the whole time I just was like, it feels so nice. And on top of all that, I was writing, so my current main character, Nicole, who's blind, I write extensively on how she experiences the world without access to sight. And tactile experiences play a crucial role, and it's something that she also wants to bring out in her art. So I was writing the other day about the pleasure that she got just from the feeling of the yarn going over her hands and how her boyfriend wants to feel more connected. And so when he was knitting, because she taught him to knit, he closed his eyes to try to get that same feeling. So it was really fun to write about it. And that led me down the rabbit hole of, well, why is that? And here's some of this cashmere yarn I'm using. I'm sure it was around for a while in the store. I don't know. I tried to look up this company. It's called Jade's Sapphire to see, how they get at this cashmere. All I can tell you is that's from Mongolia, and it just feels incredibly soft. There's literally a difference between the way this yarn feels, the hand, the evenness, the way that the strands stay together so there's no splitting or anything. It's beautifully produced, but I understand why it's looked at as a luxury fiber. Now that may have something to do with just plain being rare, but just the feeling of it when I knit it, it's hard to beat. Here's another example of something that, oh my gosh, it was so fun to knit. This was Angora. I met someone at the Fiber Festival in Fargo probably 3 years ago who raised her own Angora rabbits and produced her own yarn. And it's just incredible. The colors are to die for as well. But you could probably make out the halo on this. And again, so I'm like, why is it? Why do we derive so much pleasure from things that are soft? And you can't really compare. So even this is just wool, and it has a lot more texture to it than the cashmere. It's less soft, but it's got a richer feel to it. So it's more fuzzy, furry, in the sense of you can really tell that the hairs have scales on them. This is a yarn I got in Toronto. It's 50% Blueface Leicester, 30% Romney, 15% Masham, and 5% Zwartlis. Somebody was trying to tell me how to pronounce that. My Dutch is not very good, but I want to knit this because just the skein alone feels good. And here I have some, I just picked it up on a whim. Don't hit me. It's from Hobby Lobby. I like the colors, and I thought, well, there are times when we want to knit something out of synthetic yarn for whatever reason. I thought this would be fun to make cat toys out of. But it's just, even though it's soft, it's not the same. It's just not the same. It feels stringy. It feels, it's poofy, right? But just the feeling of the yarn itself, it's not the same. So I'm like, why not, So I dug into this topic a little bit, and I thought I would share some of my insights. Now, you can go on all kinds of stuff into different receptors that are in the skin and how they work and how they produce dopamine and whatever else it is that they're producing that makes the sensation have this pleasant effect on us. But I was much more interested in the evolutionary aspect of this. So it turns out that when mammals first came on the scene, the newborns were hairless. They were hairless and completely dependent on the maternal care, their moms, to help them survive. So, in other words, survival hinged on tactile cues for these early mammals. So we are evolved from early mammals who were dependent on, clinging to their mother for warmth and protection. And the fur on the mother was protection against the cold, so it was insulating, and it was also a barrier against parasites and against abrasions. So I think it's safe to say that huskies don't skin their knees as often as human beings do because they got way more fur. So protecting the skin against threats. And there's a kind of a neural imprint involved in that has this dopamine reward loop that goes on with it. So I'm not going to get into all of the scientific stuff, but it makes sense to me that, early mammals, the babies were dependent on the mother's fur in order to survive. And then there was the whole aspect of maternal grooming. So when the mother groomed the child, the baby mammal, to remove debris and stimulate circulation, also caused bonding. So this, kind of skin to skin bonding, or in that case, fur to fur. And it resulted in the release of oxytocin and endorphins during stroking, which ended up reinforcing the idea that a soft touch was synonymous with safety and care. So that's pretty interesting. So the ultimate outcome of that is that the brain wired a positive reinforcement circuit that treats this whole idea of a tactile signature of soft animal fur with as a proxy for warmth, protection, and nurturing. So in other words, soft fur. So this equals, right? Warmth, protection, and nurturing. You don't get the same thing from stainless steel or plastic, right? So there's also some connections to temperature, the so-called comfort temperature hypothesis. And even though, humans don't have to cling to their mother's coat for survival, we have clothes, but the clothes are almost like the replacement for the absent fur that was lost in our species over time. So soft animal fibers have a so-called thermal inertia, and it keeps the skin slightly warmer, but it does so without overheating it. And evolution sort of created this kind of preference for materials that have these kinds of effects. They reduce heat loss, they have low thermal conductivity, and increase efficiency, energy efficiency, particularly in cold climates. And they also provided a kind of a gentle, non-irritating pressure. And this prevented micro injuries that could become portals for infection. So that's pretty interesting too. So furry coats, soft woolly coats were associated with temperature regulation and also a kind of a pressure that it's like non-irritating, and it would prevent micro injuries. And there's a bunch of stuff about, somatosensory cortex responses and stuff like that. But there's something about pleasing warmth with very subtle pressure that triggers a sense of comfort. That's basically it. It's a sense of comfort. Now, here's something else that comes into play with all this. Fur quality, especially in primate species, the quality of the fur of maybe a potential mate has something to say about health and genetic fitness. So if an animal had a dense, well-maintained coat, they were less likely to carry parasites, and they were more capable of thermal regulation. So this created a bias in humans toward soft, well-kept textures, and that translated into aesthetic preferences for clothing, bedding, and crafted textiles that have these same features. Pretty interesting stuff. And here's another dimension. Something has to do with neurochemistry, neurochemicals. Repeated exposure to soft, natural fibers during infancy and early childhood consolidates the tactile memory and reinforces it. So later encounters with similar textures reactivate this whole pleasant touch sensation. And the result is that we release dopamine, oxytocin, and internal opioids that live inside us, like an analgesic kind of soothing feeling. In other words, it's just pleasant, but there's an evolutionary reason for that. So why is it that synthetic fibers don't give us this same level of satisfaction? So when you think about the surface, like I was talking about before about how the wool has scales on it, it has this rich texture to it. The microscopic scales add a kind of a canvas for sensory feeling that is more rewarding, and the irregularities stimulate a broad spectrum of receptors in the skin, in the nerves in the skin. By contrast, the filaments of, say, acrylic or polyester are by nature smooth and uniform. They do not have microfeatures. It's almost like the very fact that they're unnatural makes them less pleasant, And I just kind of, I was clothes shopping in Sweden, and I was telling y'all, I just ran across so much linen and a lot of cotton and wool. Oh my gosh, all the wool coats. I really wish I could have afforded a wool coat there. That was just so nice. But then when you compare that with the feeling against your skin of like a polyester shirt or, the so-called wicking fabrics that, use technology or something to supposedly wick away your sweat. I don't know. It just doesn't feel good. Natural scales evolved to trap air and to create insulation. And there's nothing insulating about polyester or acrylic. The textures and the potential for those air pockets, that is really the key to the insulating qualities of natural fibers. But synthetic fibers, they don't have that. There's also a question of loft. And this comes into play with the crimp from wool. It creates a kind of a cloud-like bulk that rebounds gently. It's got a kind of a bounce to it, which is it's just so satisfying and rewarding. Whereas when the crimp is engineered and it's too even, it just doesn't have the same capacity to arouse that pleasant sensation in it. It doesn't have the same variability of animal fibers. The loft is what yields this kind of temperature regulating quality. And yeah, synthetics, they just don't have that. So another thing that is peculiar to animal hairs in regard to thermal conductivity, the thermal conductivity in wool, for example, is low because of the trapped air. Whereas the thermal conductivity in acrylic or something like that is high. So that's why if I put on an acrylic cap, I don't feel nearly as warm as I do if I put on a wool cap. And it takes a lot less wool, I think, on your head to create that thermal regulation than it does acrylic. So I'd have to wear a really thick acrylic hat to get any insulating quality at all. Whereas with wool, I just have to wear, a DK or even a fingering weight yarn if it's colorwork or something like that. It gives me plenty of insulation, plenty of comfort, temperature type signal. Last feature, well, one of the last, not quite, but moisture handling. So wool and the like actually do absorb sweat and wick sweat while staying soft. So the term that comes up for that is hygroscopic. Whereas something like this is hydrophobic. It sheds moisture. It repels moisture. So it's not going to give you the same sensation of controlling like maybe sweat or rain coming in or whatever. It's just not going to work in the same way that an animal fiber would. The moisture absorption is also useful because it reduces friction and it allows for a smoother sensation of gliding against the skin, which is also interpreted by the brain as soft. We don't have that with acrylic. It doesn't feel smooth. It feels, again, I think it has a lot greater potential to give you those abrasions we were talking about earlier. So here's something else that plays a role: electrostatic behavior. We all know that synthetic fibers are prone to static buildup, and then you're going to get shocked by it. And you have to use those cancer-causing dryer sheets in order to prevent that. There's no static buildup in wool and animal fiber. The proteins conduct charges away, and they don't collect static electricity and shock us the way that, like polyester would. So that also enhances the pleasant experience of something that's made of wool or angora or whatever. And lastly, there's something about the chemical composition of animal fibers that also interacts in a positive biochemical way with skin. Protein-based fibers have amino acid side chains that interact weakly with skin lipids, producing a faint warmth sensation. All I can tell you is that, like, if I have something with lanolin in it, it's going to feel a heck of a lot nicer than if I wear something that was made from petroleum. And this gives the fiber a kind of a natural feel that also kind of reinforces that evolutionary bias towards animal fibers that we have because of our history as fur-bearing beings. So I found this all kind of fascinating. I'm like, what is it, about fur that, like, why do we chase after that? Why do we want that? Why does that make us feel so good? And not that I need an excuse, but, it's kind of interesting to know that it has to do with maternal nurturing, with the mother-infant bond, and reinforcing feelings of protection, nurturing, safety, and care. So yeah, that's why we like this stuff and we like this stuff less. There's a good reason, and I think that based on science alone, it's our job to spoil ourselves with a little cashmere. I still haven't knit up this baby, but this is mostly wool, and it's got the alpaca in it. 84% wool, 6% alpaca. I don't know, maybe I'll just make a giant hat. This is gonna show up in my videos until I figure out the best use of it. Y'all gave me some good suggestions, and I don't know, I still haven't narrowed it down. But it is soft, and It's a great answer to what's in the news today. So I'm going to play with this instead of watching the news. I encourage y'all to do the same. On the book front, the paperback's out in all major markets now, and the ebook's out. So if you're interested in the ebook, let me know and I'll send you a link. As soon as I get my author's copies, I'm going to do more of a formal announcement and show y'all what the book looks in real life. But for now, I'm just going to hug this. Y'all take care. Bye.